Something feels different around this team right now, and if you've been paying close attention, you can feel the tension starting to build. The vibe inside that quarterback room doesn't feel as simple as people thought it would be a few months ago. One guy sounds calm, confident, completely in control, while the other still feels like he's trying to prove he belongs. And honestly, that's why this whole situation is getting Vikings fans so divided right now. Because this might not be the future everybody expected anymore. And once you hear what was said behind those microphones, you'll understand exactly why people are starting to panic a little bit. If you're rocking with the squad, no matter what, hit that like button right now and drop a SKOL baby in the comments so I know the real fans are here. What just happened inside the Minnesota Vikings quarterback room may have revealed far more than the team ever intended to show publicly. And if you really pay attention to the tone, the wording, and the attitude coming from both quarterbacks, it starts to paint a picture that Vikings fans are either refusing to see or simply don't want to admit yet. Because when Mccarthy and Kyler Murray finally addressed the media together after Minnesota's shocking quarterback move, the contrast between the two was impossible to ignore. One sounded like a veteran leader who already understands exactly how to command a locker room. The other sounded uncomfortable, defensive, and maybe even caught off guard by the reality of the situation unfolding around him. And whether Vikings fans like hearing that or not, the answers themselves are now creating a serious debate across the fan base. McCarthy was asked directly about the Vikings bringing Kyler Murray into the organization, and his response immediately raised eyebrows. Instead of embracing the move publicly, instead of talking about learning from a former #1 overall pick, instead of sounding energized by the opportunity to compete and grow, McCarthy went in a completely different direction. He talked about the organization making a decision to improve the depth and quality of the quarterback room, while focusing mainly on continuing the upward trajectory he believed he established late last season. Now, here's where things get really interesting for Vikings fans. That upward trajectory McCarthy referenced is something many people around the league simply do not view the same way Minnesota fans do. Because while there were flashes late in the year, critics are pointing out that the sample size came against struggling defenses and teams already collapsing by season's end. Green Bay backups, the Cowboys' defense during one of their worst stretches, the Giants' defense, which ranked near the bottom of the NFL, Washington already rolling through the motions, and that's why this conversation suddenly feels much bigger than just quarterback competition. There's a growing belief that the Vikings front office may not be nearly as convinced about McCarthy internally as portions of the fan base still are publicly. Because if Minnesota truly viewed JJ as a locked-in franchise quarterback entering year 3, would they aggressively bring in a player like Kyler Murray? Especially a former Heisman winner, former first overall pick, and established NFL starter with years of experience? Then came the second answer from McCarthy that really intensified the conversation. When asked about his relationship with Kyler Murray, McCarthy described it as two guys in the classroom, saying one sits on one side while the other sits somewhere else, and that it's the coach's responsibility to teach them both. That answer instantly exploded among Vikings circles online. Not because it was openly hostile. It wasn't. But because fans expected something entirely different. Many expected McCarthy to publicly embrace Murray as a mentor, to talk about learning from a veteran, to mention studying his experience, to sound hungry for growth. Instead, the response came across distant, almost detached from the opportunity standing right in front of him. And then, Kyler Murray stepped to the microphone. That's when the tone of the entire story shifted. Because Murray answered the exact same topic in a completely different way. He immediately referred to McCarthy as a younger player. He talked about helping him however possible. He mentioned being 7 years into the league, entering veteran territory, and wanting to share knowledge whenever needed. That difference in maturity and leadership jumped off the page immediately. One quarterback sounded like someone trying to protect his territory. The other sounded like someone fully comfortable walking into the building, believing he belongs there as the leader of the room. And honestly, Vikings fans are now being forced to confront a reality they may have avoided for months. Kyler Murray carries himself like the starter already. Not just because of experience, not just because of resume, but because of confidence. Murray's answers throughout the media session sounded polished, calm, direct, and authoritative. McCarthy's answers, meanwhile, continued leaning heavily into odd classroom and high school analogies that left many people confused about what he was actually trying to communicate. At one point, McCarthy was asked whether there was awkwardness inside the quarterback room now that Murray had arrived. His answer? He compared it to being in high school with another person sitting on the opposite side of the room. And that answer may have accidentally revealed more than he intended. Because even while denying awkwardness, the explanation itself almost implied the exact opposite. Instead of shutting down the narrative immediately with confidence, McCarthy's wording gave the impression that he's still processing what this move truly means for his future in Minnesota. Meanwhile, Murray continued sounding completely unfazed. When asked about confidence, his response sounded exactly like what NFL organizations want from franchise quarterbacks. He called his confidence unshakable, saying no matter what happens day to day, he knows he'll continue giving his best effort and won't waver mentally. That answer resonated heavily inside Vikings discussions because it sounded like a player who has already survived adversity, criticism, media pressure, organizational dysfunction, and expectations at the highest level. And that matters here, because Kyler Murray did not develop inside stability. He came from Arizona, an organization many around the league openly view as one of the NFL's least functional environments over the past several years. Yet despite that chaos, Murray still produced stretches of high-level football, earned Pro Bowl recognition, and kept the Cardinals competitive far more often than people remember. Now suddenly, he walks into Minnesota with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Kevin O'Connell, a quarterback-friendly offense, and arguably the best offensive structure of his career. And here's the scary part for the rest of the NFC. Murray himself knows it. He openly described Minnesota's offense as one of the most quarterback-friendly systems in football and even called the skill position talent around him an embarrassment of riches. That comment alone has Vikings fans buzzing because if Murray genuinely regains top form inside Kevin O'Connell's system, this offense could look radically different than what fans saw last year. But at the same time, every compliment Murray gives this offense indirectly creates another difficult question about McCarthy. If this system is truly that quarterback-friendly, then why did the offense struggle so much with him last season? And that's exactly why this quarterback storyline is becoming impossible to ignore. Do Vikings fans still fully believe J.J. McCarthy is unquestionably the future? Or is the organization quietly preparing for Kyler Murray to completely take over this team? Because based on the tone of these press conferences alone, the momentum inside that quarterback room may already be shifting. What do you think, Vikings fans? Is Kyler Murray already showing more leadership than J.J. McCarthy? Or are people overreacting way too early? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this debate is only getting started. And the deeper you look into this situation, the more it feels like the Vikings may already know exactly where this is headed, even if they aren't ready to say it publicly yet. Because organizations do not make moves like this by accident. You do not bring in a veteran quarterback with Kyler Murray's resume, experience, confidence, and pedigree unless there are real concerns behind the scenes about your current situation. That's what makes this entire story feel so much bigger than a normal quarterback competition. Minnesota fans spent years emotionally investing in J.J. McCarthy as the future of the franchise. They defended the draft selection. They defended the development timeline. They defended the inconsistent performances. They defended the injuries. And now, suddenly, the Vikings bring in a quarterback who immediately sounds more prepared to lead the football team than the guy who has supposedly been developing inside the building for years. And honestly, that's where the tension is coming from right now across the fan base. Because people aren't just debating talent anymore. They're debating identity. They're debating whether the Vikings may have misread the future at the most important position in sports. One of the biggest criticisms now surfacing around McCarthy is maturity. Not physical tools, not arm strength, not mobility, maturity, leadership, presence, the ability to command a room, the ability to answer pressure with confidence instead of awkward analogies. And fair or unfair, that matters immensely at quarterback in the NFL. Look around the league right now. Jared Goff transformed his career largely because of stability and maturity. Jordan Love stepped into one of the hardest situations imaginable in Green Bay and handled it calmly. Caleb Williams entered the league carrying enormous expectations and already speaks publicly with confidence and command. Jaden Daniels reached the NFC Championship game as a rookie while handling national attention every single week. So when people say JJ is still young, there are others responding with, "Yes, but this is year 3 now." See, that's the key point creating concern inside portions of the Vikings community. At some stage, fans stop grading quarterbacks based on potential and start grading them based on command of the position. And whether people want to admit it or not, Kyler Murray currently looks far more comfortable carrying that responsibility. What's fascinating is that Murray himself seems to understand the opportunity sitting in front of him perfectly. This doesn't feel like Arizona anymore. In Arizona, he dealt with coaching instability, roster problems, organizational criticism, and constant national narratives questioning his leadership. The infamous study clause in his contract became one of the biggest stories in football at the time. Reporters questioned his preparation habits. Analysts questioned his focus. And Murray never forgot that. But one thing he pointed out during this media availability was incredibly important. He reminded people that at 5'9", he never had the luxury of coasting on physical traits alone. He had to outwork people just to reach this level. He had to become the best quarterback in Texas high school football history. He had to win the Heisman Trophy. He had to become the first overall pick, despite constant doubts about his size. That mentality is what Vikings fans are suddenly starting to connect with, because there's a different edge to Murray now, a different calmness, a different professionalism. He sounds like a quarterback who has already experienced failure, criticism, adversity, and pressure, and came out stronger because of it. And maybe the most eye-opening statistic mentioned during this entire discussion says everything about his value. When Kyler Murray started games in Arizona, the Cardinals were competitive. Without him, they completely collapsed. The difference in their performance with and without him was staggering. That's not accidental. That's what real franchise quarterbacks do. They elevate broken situations. They raise the floor of organizations that otherwise would completely fall apart. And now he's stepping into arguably the best environment of his NFL career. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Kevin O'Connell, a stable ownership structure, a playoff-caliber roster, a quarterback-friendly scheme, an offensive system specifically built to maximize quarterback efficiency. You can already feel why some Vikings fans are beginning to get genuinely excited about this possibility. Because if Murray even approaches the upper end of his potential inside this offense, Minnesota suddenly becomes a very dangerous team in the NFC. And that's where this becomes uncomfortable for J.J. McCarthy supporters. The conversation is slowly shifting away from "Can McCarthy develop?" toward "Why wait if Murray is already better?" That's the real tension here, because once fans begin seeing the veteran as the safer option, the more pressure immediately falls on the younger quarterback. Every answer gets analyzed more closely. Every performance carries more weight. Every sign of uncertainty becomes magnified. And based on these media appearances, Murray looked like someone embracing the spotlight, while McCarthy looked like someone still trying to figure out how to navigate it. Now, to be fair, this does not automatically mean J.J. McCarthy cannot still become a successful quarterback. NFL careers are long. Development is unpredictable. Quarterbacks mature at different speeds. Plenty of players struggle early before eventually figuring things out. But what cannot be ignored anymore is this: the Vikings no longer appear willing to simply hand him the future uncontested. And honestly, that may be the biggest takeaway from all of this. Minnesota brought in real competition, not a backup, not a placeholder, not a mentor collecting checks late in his career. A legitimate starting caliber quarterback who still believes he can thrive at a high level in this league. And after hearing both men speak, it increasingly feels like Kyler Murray fully expects this to become his football team sooner rather than later. Now the question becomes, how will J.J. McCarthy respond? Will this pressure unlock the best version of him? Will competition accelerate his growth and maturity? Or are Vikings fans witnessing the early stages of a complete changing of the guard at quarterback? Because whether people want to admit it or not, this quarterback room suddenly feels very different than it did just a few weeks ago. And Vikings fans are officially divided. So now it's your turn. If the season started tomorrow, who are you trusting to lead this team? Kyler Murray or J.J. McCarthy? Drop your answer below, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay locked in, because this quarterback battle in Minnesota may end up becoming one of the biggest stories in the entire NFL.